Jets owner Woody Johnson gives his explanation for why he decided to fire head coach Robert Saleh. And after his explanation, everybody was left more confused. Let's break down Woody's comments today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Wednesday, October 9th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from gangreennation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. It was one of the most eventful Tuesdays in New York Jets history yesterday as the team decided to fire Robert Saleh, the first in-season coaching change for the team in almost 50 years. Today, we're going to talk about what this could mean for general manager Joe Douglas. We're going to talk about an offense that it's not clear who's in charge right now. But first, we're going to talk about the owner, Woody Johnson, who made the decision to fire Robert Saleh yesterday and then spoke to the media. And whenever we break down Woody Johnson's comments to the media, we're going to hear some things that don't make a whole lot of sense. It's going to be a Woody Johnson press conference show, and those are always a lot of fun. One of the things that struck me about yesterday was that Joe Douglas was nowhere to be found. You know, you would think that the team firing its coach would involve the GM in some ways. And Woody claims that he called and consulted Douglas, but Woody says this is ultimately my decision. Douglas did not address the press yesterday. I mean, I was making a joke. Is Joe Douglas still the general manager of this team? What's he doing? He's kind of like the Pluto of NFL general managers. You may remember like 15, 20 years ago, there was a planet named Pluto. It was the ninth planet from the sun, and then it lost its planet status. It's kind of like Pluto. Is it a planet? Is it not? Is Joe Douglas, is he the GM? Is he not? Because it doesn't sound like the GM had anything to do with this firing. Woody said it was all his decision. And, you know, whenever Woody's making a decision, you know it's going to be very well thought out. Now, look, nobody should feel bad for Robert Saleh. 20-36 record, team constantly undisciplined. He could never figure out the offense. And beyond any of that, even if you felt bad for Robert Saleh, you know, he's going to work the next year. He doesn't have to work the next year and a half. He's going to get paid very handsomely by the Jets to not do a whole lot. He can take a year off if he wants to. So, you know, nobody should feel bad for Robert Saleh. As we discussed yesterday, I think the firing was justified, but the path we got here left me a little confused. And the answers the owner gave left me even more confused. Now, beyond the general manager apparently having nothing to do with this, and this goes back to, you know, something we discussed yesterday on the show. And if you're new to the podcast, this is a daily podcast. We have new episodes Monday through Friday. Woody Johnson, one of the problems with him is that he never can honestly assess this team. He always thinks that there's some quick fix, there's some magical formula that's going to solve all the team's problems. So if you watch this team right now, I think you could say that head coaching was a problem. No question about it. But I think you'd also have to say the assistant coaching on the offensive side of the ball is a problem. Aaron Rodgers is a problem right now. Aaron Rodgers' inability to move, and Aaron Rodgers' reluctance to take a hit, and Aaron Rodgers' inability to stay healthy after he takes a hit. That's a problem. The offensive line's performance is a problem. The defense, even though the statistics are very good, their inconsistency on the defensive line, their inconsistency stopping the run is a problem. But when you hear Woody Johnson yesterday, he talks about how talented the team is. He says this is the most talented team. This is one of the most talented teams that's ever been assembled by the New York Jets. I feel that we had to go in a different direction. And he said that he thinks Ulbrich gives the Jets the opportunity to get the most out of the team. So I just get the sense that Woody Johnson didn't make this move because of the things we mentioned about Robert Saleh. I think Woody Johnson was just kind of looking for a scapegoat. And Woody Johnson thinks that, you know, we got Aaron Rodgers. We're all set here. We're ready to go. And it was Robert Saleh is the reason. It's easy to like blame it all on one person, and Robert Saleh has to take his share of the blame. But I just get the feeling Woody thinks this is a silver bullet. Another thing Woody said, and this should raise a lot of eyebrows. He was asked if Aaron Rodgers had anything to do with this, and he said that he spoke with Aaron Rodgers Monday night, and the topic didn't come up. He mentioned he congratulated Rodgers on reaching the milestone of 60,000 passing yards for his career, and he apologized to him for how many hits he took, which I mean, it's kind of weird for an owner to be apologizing to a player for the performance of other players. But you're telling me you spoke with the franchise quarterback, you're going to fire the head coach the next day, and you didn't mention it? This didn't come up? I mean, it's a little tough to believe. And like, I want to be very precise with my wording because I don't want to like make accusations when I don't know what's happening. But when you say something like that, you open yourself up to a lot of questions about what Rodgers' role actually was. If you're claiming you didn't even mention that you were going to fire the coach, it's difficult. It's just tough to believe. I mean, the other alternative is I was thinking, recently I had a trip to Europe. So when I was in Italy or France, every morning I'd go to the cafe. And when I was at the cafe, I'd decide, I'd get a coffee. I'd decide, am I going to get an espresso? Am I going to get a cappuccino today? And if Woody is to be believed, it's almost like he showed up at the team facility yesterday morning and, said, kind of like when I'm deciding, am I going to get an espresso or a cappuccino? He's deciding, should I fire the coach? Should I not fire the coach? Yeah, let's fire the coach. It almost sounds like, and this is like the version Woody's telling us. It sounds like he just kind of made a snap decision. It's like it's almost as though I put more thought into my coffee order than what he did about whether he was going to fire the coach, because it doesn't sound like anybody was prepared for this. There were a number of reports that the players were surprised by this, and there were questions about and fair questions some of the players were asking behind the scenes about how does this fix the offense, and that's my question also. Because look, I think that Robert Saleh is responsible for the offense. I don't agree with people who say Robert Saleh is only responsible for the defense. You're the head coach of the team. You have to be held to account for the offensive results. But when you fire a head coach with a defensive background, you look at fair. You want to say Robert Saleh ultimately has to be held responsible for the offense's lack of production? I agree with you. He's the head coach. But when you only fire the head coach who has a defensive background and you don't touch the offensive coaching staff, it shows me you're not serious about fixing the problem. And Woody was actually asked about, what this is going to do to help the offense. And his answer was, we need to find ways to win. We're not going to find those ways doing the same thing over and over. And then he said that Ulbrich will bring a spark of positivity. So Robert Saleh's problem with the offense was he didn't realize we have to find ways to win. Robert Saleh, the positivity is going to change the offense because, you say, it's the old cliche. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over. What he said, we're not going to find those ways doing the same thing over and over. Well, you didn't change anything. If Nathaniel Hackett, at the very least, and also Keith Carter, the offensive line coach, are going out the door with Saleh, then I'm saying, okay, fine. Look, Saleh is responsible for the offense, so he goes. Fair enough. But so do the guys who are responsible for the overall implementation of the offense. When you do this, you're not holding people accountable. What's changing? You haven't changed anything. The offense, the offensive coaching staff has remained the same. And Robert Saleh, again, hold the results against him, but he's not the guy overseeing the day-to-day on this offense. So unless you think that like Robert Saleh was too negative and suddenly the schemes are going to start working better because Jeff Ulbricht's going to bring positivity to things, it doesn't really add up. There's something here that just doesn't make sense. And I don't know what it is, and I don't want to make accusations, but you're saying you didn't talk to Rodgers at all. You're saying you just showed up. The GM is nowhere to be found, and you just showed up, and we made some snap decision, but because we need to fix the offense, but nothing has changed on the offense. Do you see why this doesn't really make sense? I mean, I don't know what it is. It very well might just be Woody thinking that, I'll just fire the head coach and everything will fall into place. It may be something else going on, but I think that these comments were baffling. I mean, even by Woody Johnson standards, I was reading these comments and I was like, what on earth is he saying? I have less clarity now about this move than I did before the press conference. And I think it speaks to the overall level of chaos within this Jets organization. This team needs a win on Monday because it is as chaotic as it's ever been within this organization at the moment. And Jeff Ulbricht's going to have to be the guy who figures things out. Now, one way he can figure things out is actually making some changes on the offensive coaching staff. And one of the reasons, Ulbricht's got to figure out the offensive coaching staff, we don't know who's in charge right now because Robert Saleh apparently made a change minutes before he was fired. We have no idea whether that change is going to stick or not. I can't wait to tell you about this as we continue here on this this Wednesday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best play to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less than at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get in the action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. And PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. What players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Just download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. On Tuesday, the Jets fired head coach Robert Saleh. And this came as a big surprise to many of us. I was surprised because the Jets have never fired a coach in season since Woody Johnson became the owner. Robert Saleh apparently was very surprised. Robert Saleh was so surprised, he was getting ready to prepare the team for week 6 against Buffalo. And the first order of business for Saleh, according to Connor Hughes of SNY, was he had decided to demote Nathaniel Hackett. Now, Saleh was not going to fire Hackett like he should have. I guess, politics come into play there, being friends with Aaron Rodgers. But Saleh was actually going to make the right move. He was going to demote Hackett, strip him of his play calling duties. I guess he would remain the offensive coordinator in title, but in title only. And Todd Downing would take over as the play caller. Now, Todd Downing's no great play caller. The last time he was offensive coordinator 2 years ago with the Tennessee Titans, he had one of the worst offenses in the league. In fact, he had an offense that produced less than the Jets did with Mike LaFleur. Mike LaFleur, who was very criticized at the time, ran a better offense than Todd Downing did. But Todd Downing did run a better offense than Nathaniel Hackett did in Denver. I think Todd Downing would be one of the 5 worst offensive coordinators in the league. I still think he'd be an upgrade over Nathaniel Hackett. And he was set to take over running the Jets offense this week. And it's a sad state of affairs when Todd Downing's an upgrade, but that's where he is. Now that's been thrown up into the air. We don't know who's running the Jets offense right now. Jeff Ulbrich did not really provide much illumination into that when he spoke to the media yesterday. Ulbrich indicated that, he was going to look at everything. And I mean, I think Ulbrich was probably so shocked when Ulbrich showed up at the office on Tuesday. He didn't realize he was going to be the head coach by the end of the day. So he's got to figure this out. So we have no idea who's running the Jets offense. The Jets need to start preparing for this game against Buffalo. It shows you like the level of chaos this organization's been thrown into by Woody Johnson, where the team thought it was making a change, or at least the head coach thought he was making a change, and then 5 minutes later he gets fired. I mean, it's like out of a skit or something. It's like out of SNL. Just a truly bizarre set of circumstances. I'm frustrated that this decision comes down to Jeff Ulbrich. Now, let me say this. If Jeff Ulbrich makes the move, if Jeff Ulbrich strips Nathaniel Hackett of his play calling duties, I immediately will approve of the Jeff Ulbrich administration. I think that would be the greatest first step he could take. Get rid of, if you can't fire Hackett because of office politics, at least take away his influence. Get him away from having any influence with this offense. Let him go hang out with Aaron Rodgers and watch Austin Powers movies and do all that stuff. He can go Aaron Rodgers' friend, which is, frankly, if you watch the offense, it seems like that's the only job he's doing right now. Todd Downing should take over as offensive coordinator, but I don't understand why this should fall to Jeff Ulbrich. Again, if you want to fix the actual issues with this team, getting rid of Saleh, maybe that improves the team's preparation. Maybe. I mean, I think we're kind of at the point where the Jets, it made sense to move on from Saleh, but not from the standpoint that you can have a lot of confidence that Jeff Ulbrich's going to take over this team and right this ship. And I like Jeff Ulbrich, but this is a Herculean task. This would be an enormous undertaking for a head coach with a lot of head coaching experience to throw a first-time head coach into a situation like this, where the team really feels like it's kind of, spiraling out of control, where the season's on the brink, where you had these expectations, the glare of the spotlight of Aaron Rodgers, the glare in the spotlight of the New York media. And you kind of have to figure out how to adjust to the new normal on defense, because I haven't heard the announcement yet, but Ulbrich can't really be as hands-on with the defense as he used to. And we don't know how much Saleh was contributing to the defense. So the defensive coaching is going to change now. The question is, why didn't the offensive coaching change? And why does this fall to Jeff Ulbrich? And again, this goes back to Woody Johnson, how Woody Johnson never wants to accurately assess. He never wants to be honest with his assessments with this team. There's always some magical move that's going to save everything. And that's why I think that's one of the reasons the Jets traded for Aaron Rodgers last year, is that Woody Johnson thought, oh, if I get Aaron Rodgers, everything will be fine. And now that things have fallen apart, Woody Johnson needed a scapegoat. And the thing about scapegoats are sometimes they deserve part of the blame. Robert Saleh clearly deserved part of the blame. He deserved, I'd say maybe more than part of the blame. He deserved a lot of the blame. But Robert Saleh was not the only problem with this team. A big part of the problem with this team was the coaching. It was the offensive coaching. And look, Saleh has to own that because Saleh brought these guys in. I think it's very easy to blame Nathaniel Hackett all on Aaron Rodgers. And look, I think Aaron Rodgers has a lot to do with why Nathaniel Hackett's here, but the Jets hired Nathaniel Hackett before Aaron Rodgers got here. And look, Todd Downing has nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers. Keith Carter has nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers. These are all coaches responsible for this, and these were coaches hired by Robert Saleh. So now we're in a situation where you just have to find the least bad option. And the least bad option is probably Todd Downing. It'd be great, though, if the Jets knew who was running their offense. And look, it's not Ulbrich's fault. He was just thrown into this chaotic situation yesterday. He was thrown into this whirlwind scenario. I'm not even sure if he knew Hackett had been demoted. So the question is, does that demotion still stick with Hackett? Are the Jets moving in a different direction somehow? There's just a lot that's up in the air with this team. It's a very, very chaotic situation. And usually for a Monday night game, Wednesday would be like the first day where you start to implement the game plan. So this will be worth watching. And, Jeff Ulbrich's media availability, that'll be worth paying attention to try and figure out who's in charge right now, because we have kind of a power vacuum with this football team. We don't know who's really going to be helping Ulbrich run the defense, and we don't know who's running the offense right now. What a crazy situation the Jets are in. And of course, Woody Johnson tends to take chaotic situations and make them even more chaotic, but it doesn't seem like Woody entered this with a plan. It really doesn't seem to me like Woody thought this through. It doesn't seem like he thought through the domino effects of all this. I don't think he thought through, how's this going to adjust our defensive coaching? I don't think he thought through. He obviously didn't have any idea what was going on with the offensive side of the ball. He's not making any changes on the offensive side of the ball. He should have fired Hackett and Carter at the very least. At the very least, he should have fired Hackett. Now this falls to Jeff Ulbrich. It's a really bizarre situation. I mean, I've seen the Jets. I've been covering the Jets a really long time. I've been following the Jets for even longer. This is as bizarre as it gets with this team. And I don't know that bizarre is necessarily good for the general manager. I had you on the Locked On Jets podcast. We're going to talk about Joe Douglas's job status. Woody Johnson said something yesterday that makes people optimistic about that Joe Douglas may have some job security. I'm not so sure about that, and I'll explain why continuing here on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with big returns on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And Jets are currently home underdogs against the Buffalo Bills. The change to Jeff Ulbrich, at least at this point, it hasn't moved the line. Jets currently 2.5-point underdogs. So I don't know, maybe you think Jeff Ulbrich's going to spark this team. FanDuel's the place to go to get in on the action because, again, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Or, maybe you're down on the Jets. Maybe you're going to put the money down on Buffalo. Either way, go to FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Again, FanDuel.com. It is America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. Hopefully they'll add a course, How to Be a Good Owner for an NFL Team. Woody Johnson should be the first one to sign up for that one. But you should know that all of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Wednesday. We're talking the firing of Robert Saleh, some of the residual effects. There's so many different angles. We'll probably be talking about this Saleh firing for days to come. One interesting thing, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is General Manager Joe Douglas was nowhere to be found yesterday. And, Peter Schrager of NFL Network said Douglas is still hard at work. There might be some transactions this week. Read into this what you want. But where was Douglas yesterday? It's almost like Douglas was cut out of the process to fire the head coach. Now, Woody Johnson at the top of his press conference, the ambassador, suggested that this is one of the most talented Jets teams that's ever been assembled. And I think some people have read this and interpreted that as good news for Joe Douglas. They're saying, well, Joe Douglas assembled that roster. So if Woody thinks it's a good roster, he's in good shape. Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that. I think that when the general manager hired a head coach and that head coach is fired and the GM is completely cut out of the process of that firing. And look, we don't know. Woody Johnson says he consulted with Joe Douglas, but Joe Douglas wasn't there at the press conference to take questions. And Woody Johnson said it was my decision. That's not a good sign for Joe Douglas. And, we can talk about the talent level on this team. Well, if the team doesn't start winning, at some point you have to wonder where the talent level is. But going beyond that, I don't think you can ever take Woody Johnson at his word when he talks about somebody who works for him. I mean, we know this for a fact. Eric Mangini in 2008 was told, Eric Mangini, and this is documented, he said this on the record, he was against the idea of trading for Brett Favre in 2008. And one of the ways Woody Johnson talked him into it was by telling him, your job's safe no matter what. This is not going to impact your job. What happened? Favre comes to the Jets. The Jets go off to an 8-3 start. Favre gets hurt down the stretch, and the team collapses. Mangini gets fired. So Woody did not keep his word. Now, the story behind 2008 was a little more complicated than that. We don't need to go there right now. The point is, Woody Johnson told this guy one thing, another thing happened. 2014 this time, I mean, you can go read what Woody Johnson was saying about John Idzik early in 2014. He talked about how we had a good plan. We're building steady. John Idzik was fired after that season. Go back to 2019. I know it's his brother, but Chris Johnson, in the span of 4 or 5 months, went from telling us Mike McCagnon was the right GM for the team to firing him. Now, this was before a game. No game was played in the interim period. So Woody Johnson doesn't know what he believes. I think this is one of the problems with Woody Johnson is that even after 25 years of owning this team, he doesn't have any core convictions. And that means that he doesn't understand what attributes a winning football team needs. He doesn't understand how to evaluate players. He doesn't understand how to evaluate what's happening on the field. I mean, this is a guy back in 2012 who talked about putting a spy on J.J. Watt. You want to put a spy on a defensive end. That's great. Woody just doesn't understand. It's amazing that the man has been an owner for as long as he's been, 2.5 decades, and still has no idea the first thing about football. Doesn't know the attributes a winning organization has, doesn't know the way teams are built, how you build through the draft, how the salary cap works, the attributes you need in a good head coach. He doesn't know any of these things. So when he goes out there and says, Jeff Ulbricht's going to bring a spirit, well, you hope that's right. And Ulbricht has done a good job as defensive coordinator, but Woody Johnson has no credibility to tell us who a good head coach is going to be. I don't think you can trust Woody at his word. Something that came up a lot yesterday was people saying, I made the point that the Jets should have fired Robert Saleh at the end of the last season. And a comment that I kept hearing over and over was, better to admit your mistake now. I don't understand what this Jets ownership has done to earn any grace for messing up the decision to not fire Saleh a year ago, because everything that was a problem at the end of last season is still a problem now. And everything that we saw this year that was a problem at the end of last season. So I don't understand why we just let Jets ownership off the hook. It's not like this is an ownership that's been successful. It's an ownership that's been late on so many things. And this was a critical thing to be late on, because if the Jets had brought in a new coaching staff, that could actually change things. Right now, you're just hoping the coaches, you fired Saleh, and you're hoping the coaches that he hired can turn it around, even on the offensive side of the ball. The offense is such a problem, yet we didn't change anything on the offensive side of the ball. This is a problem. And at the end of the day, I don't think any of this reflects well on Joe Douglas, because at the end of the day, I think Woody Johnson's going to look for someone to blame. And Woody Johnson's not going to, we know one thing, Woody Johnson will never blame himself for anything that goes wrong. Woody Johnson will never be self-reflective. He'll never look in the mirror. I would love it if Woody Johnson would finally at some point get embarrassed enough to learn his lesson. I would love it if Woody Johnson ever showed some humility and actually like really started studying football and studying his mistakes in the past. There's no self-reflection in this guy, though. He inherited all of his money, and he's never, he never built anything. A lot of NFL owners at least have built a business. At least they've had some success elsewhere. Woody Johnson inherited all of his money. He just looks for people to blame. So Robert Saleh's gone. Yeah, I know what he said about the team being talented. Who do you think the next guy's going to be to go? It's going to be Joe Douglas. And, look, that probably will be justified by the end of the year. If the team doesn't start winning, because Douglas has certainly done enough to be fired, and it will probably be at a point where the Jets should start over again. So I don't think you can look at Woody Johnson's comments and take him at his word, because at the end of the day, Woody Johnson just looks for people to blame. He looks for quick solutions. He doesn't look to solve actual problems. If he did, maybe the Jets wouldn't be in this mess. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. If you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and you're listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.